Thanks a lot for joining us for today's panel on the future of digital assets and how digital assets are disrupting venture capital. I have all females with me today, and I'd like to take a moment to introduce Min Tiao from Consensus Investments, and we have Astrid Wollard from Skytel Ventures. So Min, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then Astrid follow from that. Thank you.
Sure thing. Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Min, based in London, and I lead venture investments on behalf of Consensus. We're very privileged to have backed some incredible founders in this space and have a portfolio of more than 100 equity positions, many of them early stage, but some have developed quite nicely. And we continue to invest in all through the stack, so from different protocols to infrastructure to applications, and very excited to see where space leads us.
Hi, yeah, this is Astrid. I'm from Skytel Ventures, and we invest in companies developing or utilizing blockchain technology or support the ecosystem in another way. It's primarily my job as head of research to set the strategy for our fund and determine on how we best can due diligence these companies and projects. In terms of the investment instrument, we're actually pretty agnostic for that. So it could be, for example, a token investment, it could be an equity investment, convertibles, or any combination thereof. It really depends on where the value really accrues in the end. And our sweet spot is usually in the pre-seed to typically around Series A stage, with an average ticket size of 500K to 1 million. We don't have a particular geographic focus as such, but we do tend to invest in specific sectors such as hardware, IoT, healthcare, legal tech, and a few others. Having said that, we do not normally invest in overcrowded spaces like payments or gambling. Going forward, we will likely no longer be supporting infrastructure layers as such as we have in our previous fund, which was investing in, for example, Polkadot and Energy Web Foundation and Ocean Protocol and a few others. But we really see the future in investing into applications at this stage, and in particular in building on top of these kind of infrastructure ecosystems.
Great, thank you. And I'll briefly introduce myself. So I'm Zia Word, I'm with Findy Ventures. I actually had a couple of startups previously. I exited one that was in the blockchain space in China in 2018, moderately exited. And now I work with founders and with VCs to help them solve problems, help them fundraise, and build up their strategy and international expansion. And I'm also building my own seed fund. So I wanted to jump into some questions around digital assets. So in the last few years, we've seen a variety of different vehicles in the digital asset space, from ICOs to IDOs, and now we're seeing kind of all kinds of new vehicles, and kind of the same thing, but under potentially a different name. I just wanted to ask you what you thought about those and why you think there were such a boom and bust in that regard. So, Astrid, if you wanted to start off.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Now, I think that, well, why didn't they last? I think there are several angles to that. For example, the maturity of the ecosystem. I think it's getting more professionalized. On the other hand, we also have still some regulatory uncertainty, both for the investors and for the investments, which creates quite an issue. On the other hand, I think that a lot of people saw this as a kind of get-rich-quick scheme. And you could see that this, even though digital assets sort of have the possibility to really be a high profitable investment class. It is still something that requires really full-time focus and understanding to really be able to sort of distinguish between stuff that can't really work out and the stuff that will likely work out beyond everything. And this is something that we're actually quite strong in, that we have also a very principled methodology of how we actually screen through these companies that always come to us and pitch for investment. So I think there are several angles to this, really, why this hasn't quite worked out. I think some of it will always stay to some element, and there will be always some kind of new forms of it. But in the end, I think it will come down to that VCs are sort of also here to stay, also professional investors that help really assess these kind of technologies.
Min, do you want to?
Yeah, I think, everything kind of happens in cycles ultimately. And when something is new and emergent, I think it's in many different instruments, not just tokens, it tends to be quite frothy. The value proposition of, an ERC20 token being able to, represent and transmit value is something that is extremely powerful. It's not that it's good or it's bad, but it's just a tool and technology that is quite remarkable and that many people use as a new funding source. So there have been a lot, there are a lot of great projects that were minted in the 2017 ICO bubble, like, Astrid named a few of them. We have some in our portfolio, and these teams are still building, and working on incredible research, and really have the long-term view of building the new internet stack. Equally, a lot of those teams are just not around anymore. But to some extent, I also think about it like, is it really that different from everyone trying to raise a SPAC right now? We'll see. Will retail investors actually make money from SPACs? I certainly hope they will, but probably not in every single case. I do think tokens are having a little bit of a spring awakening this year. We've seen some very successful token launches. We've seen 21 billion locked up in stablecoin, 11 billion in DeFi. So it does show us that the technology is something that's powerful, and with each cycle, we will get better at building the infrastructure that will enable better UX and UI for customers. Like now you can go on MetaMask just launched something called MetaMask Swaps. Right now it's just available in Firefox, but it'll be available on all browsers. And you can instantly swap any token you want at any time of the day and get the best price. And that's pretty cool. You can't really do that with a stock right now. But I think we're equally very excited to see some of the foundational elements that some of these early frothy periods, set for future innovations to build on.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I think what we're seeing right now is really exciting, and I think that bridge between the amazing technology that people have built and actually being usable is starting to happen. And I think that gap's closing to a smaller gap than it has been over the last couple of years, which I think is what's been needed. So you talk about the UI and the UX, and I think that's really important. People are starting to realize, the people that are building these companies are starting to realize that is a major component that's potentially been missing. And I think then from there we'll start to see kind of more mass adoption, and that's where we start to get really exciting, and we see more and more people come into the space. And I think I wanted to kind of step back a little bit to one of Astrid's points about still seeing sort of VCs in the space. And it's kind of one of my later questions, but we can talk about it now. Is that kind of sophistication around investment. One of the interesting things, of course, about digital assets is that you have a lot of unsophisticated investors or speculators and people who they're just individual investors. And I guess what do you see as the benefit of having a VC-backed company versus someone that we see right now. We see, you know, fair launches, which is, you know, they're just opening up. They're not backed by any VCs, and they're kind of wearing that almost as a badge to kind of say, look, we're open and we're ready for you to invest in us. We don't have any VC funding, and that's kind of it's kind of a benefit. They're using that as a benefit. So what do you see as the kind of, I guess, sweet spot for looking at a digital asset as an outside investor, if a VC fund isn't in on that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question kind of has, you know, decomposing it to two elements, which is, you know, like how do you sort of add value as like a VC in like the age of sort of fair launch, and what you sort of see the comparison between the fair launch model and the VC model in, you know, our space. I think fair launches are really cool. People are trying to bring back the ethos that, you know, launched like Bitcoin and Ethereum, that really happened at a very magical moment in time. And that's really great. And it's also great to sort of see a lot of community contributors come together and, you know, really sort of push a lot of open source development forward. And, you know, they're doing so for the benefit of the community, and that the community is an identity for people. That, you know, I work on Wire is like a badge of honor, and, you know, it's something that's a global movement. Like, no one needs to say, hey, you can or cannot do that. You know, your work really speaks for yourself. I do think there are a few elements. Ultimately, you know, launching a startup or a new protocol is a game of odds, and a lot more of these don't succeed than they do succeed. And, you know, having a community is similar to having a VC, is really having a very, very strong partner by your side to help you try to, you know, move the odds in your favor. We're already seeing a lot of fair launch projects, like where the community members get fatigued and, you know, think it's a bit too much, like being on Twitter and Telegram all the time. And some of them just disappear. And, you know, that's not great for teams. That's not great for investors, like, you know, for people who have trusted these teams with their capital. And so it's really a question about accountability. Can you achieve the same level of accountability with a distributed fair launch project that has anonymous founders as you would a VC-backed project? Equally, I do think that in this space, like the sort of value add that a VC can bring, like the stakes are a lot higher. You know, in a lot of sort of more traditional VC, you're not expected to have, say, a token economic specialist in your midst, or have to have like a view on active network participation and staking and running a validator, participating in governance proposals. You know, you're also not necessarily expected to provide liquidity to an emergent protocol. This might be, you know, mainly concentrated on DeFi, but, you know, I think a lot of projects going forward, even in the Web3 space, are requiring investors to be assisting them on those elements. So I do think the bar in general has been raised, because, you know, we have such an ardent community that would just do this to make, you know, make the future become a reality here.
I need to say, I think that it will be good going forward to have still a mix of all of these, because while I think, you know, it's really great to have sort of a community own sort of, so to say, a project or an infrastructure, I see an issue there that we have seen in the past, that there has been something like what one can see a tribalism, right? So that people think of this badge of honor, like, oh, I'm just Bitcoin, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, I'm just Ethereum, I'm just Polkadot, I'm just Avalanche, you know, and that these sort of act quite in silos, unfortunately. And I would hope that in the future that you really see that these actually, all of these projects actually come together and say like, okay, where do we see advantages and disadvantages of each of these projects, and how can we actually work together to make the most of it? Because in the end, if you think about mass adoption, it will only work if really all the chains can talk to each other, transact with each other, do stuff with each other. So similar, like, for example, where Polkadot comes in and really brings together this kind of interoperability of blockchains and making it possible to actually transact not only token which is uttered, but also data and states. And this is actually the really exciting part of it. And I would hope that you see, for example, there was also an announcement a week or two ago from the Energy Web Foundation working together with Ripple. And I think that's already a really nice sign where you can see that actually two blockchain projects working already together to actually create a common good outcome of something. And I would hope that this comes on more and more often now. On the other hand, I think VCs can create massive value to any of these projects, but it depends also on the projects to basically do the due diligence on these kind of investors and say like, okay, what is the benefit of getting these guys on board? So what is the kind of expertise in the team? How can they help me, you know, in various kind of ways? Either is it pushing the business forward, helping sort of facilitating maybe early stage discussions around proof of concept with other corporates? Is it something about the optimization of the digital asset strategy as such, around trading and market making? This is also something that people often don't consider, that this is a highly interdisciplinary space, not just for building stuff, but also for executing it and actually getting out to the real world. And so sometimes this is something that where a VC can help. But as I said, people really need to also do their due diligence on an investor and make sure who they actually get on board and how they use this network then.
Yeah, I think they're both really valid points. I think one of the interesting things that you both sort of brought up is a community. And I wonder how important, you know, Astrid, you sort of mentioned over tribalism. Min, you were talking about, you know, you're quite keen on community. How important then, if you're looking at an investment with a potential project, how important then is that the project to have that community kind of already built up, or is that something that you think you can help build with the team? What's your view on that?
It's certainly something that we're looking into, and I don't expect anyone to already have built a community around it, because the kind of stuff that we see can be super early stage. But what we would like to see is at least a plan of getting there, to see like, okay, what is actually a plan to engage the community, and does this sound reasonable, or are there already some, you know, some early stage movements in that space? And on a more general level, I mean, we would look also into things like the team, you know, has the team been able to deliver on solutions in the past, or do we have confidence that they actually do have the capability to create such a project or such an infrastructure? We will also look at the business model, which ties quite nicely into token economics, which is also still quite in R&D stage, but that's another topic we can probably talk about for hours and hours. But yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, because I think one of the amazing things about our industry is the community. Like, I think that's the fact that it is very community driven. It's quite mission driven. I think, you know, a lot of projects have their own missions. And so, yeah, I think that particular, I guess, balance between, you know, over tribalism and community is a really interesting spot. I think a few projects have got right. But yeah, Min, what's your sort of take on that?
Well, I think in community specifically, it's probably one of the most important things that we look for in backing teams, simply because in the world of open source, you know, it's really difficult to feature compete. And if you come up with a cool new primitive, you can expect it to be copied very quickly. Like, I think Compound has been forked more than 20 times. That's like an investment of ours. Wire, and like, you know, I think in like China alone, you have like more than 5 like different forks of Wire. And you even see in the real world, right? Like with like, so if TikTok, now you have Instagram Reels, Snapchat's also getting involved. Like, so it does really boil down to sort of the strength of the network, the incentives that really govern participation, and how invested people feel in it. And I think there are certainly tactics that you can go about building a community. And, you know, a lot of the foundational elements is just be nice, be responsive. Like, you know, our space is can be very, very technical. So I think if teams take the approach like, well, we only want like developers here, we don't necessarily want any of the trader types, and we also don't want anyone who's just like being a tourist here, I think it's going to be they're not going to feel relatable, and they're going to struggle to build community. If you look at something like GitHub, like even like in the open source world, sure, like the contributors are a very, very small percentage of the actual community of GitHub, but you have a whole bunch of people who are submitting a pull request but feeling that they're part of something, and they're almost like the fans, and they're the ones who are going to create the excitement around a protocol, which is so important for something emergent to be happening. So I think the ability to actually bootstrap community excitement, create products that people really love and that are fun, are something that we look towards. Another great example that I can think of is something that my colleague Jordan created in his spare time called Meme Protocol, and it's a really fun game that anyone can really relate to. And they have like a community of more than 2,000 people, and it's remarkable that the barriers, like while this is definitely not a technical project, but something that's given like 2,000 people across the world like joy in like a matter of weeks, and also like probably put some spare change in their pockets. It's pretty cool in our space to see.
Yeah, I think that's really it's really cool. I think one of the things that I've always thought of that's really interesting is that traditionally in business you've got a journey, like a customer journey from from kind of outlier to advocate, and it's usually like a really long journey. Whereas if you look at the crypto space, if you've got a community member, they're already your advocate, and that journey's cut down because they're already advocating for you here, there, and everywhere. And I feel like crypto's ability to build community is really, really compelling, and that's something that I think we've really done well. But I do think we need to be more inclusive, to Min's point, because there's certainly a level of over tribalism. So there is that. But yeah, I think it's really, really key. So what do you guys see as the next kind of potential frontier in the digital asset investments? Like we've kind of mentioned a little bit fair launch. Obviously that's kind of open. But what do you guys see as kind of up and coming? We've got yield farming going on. We've got there's so many new kind of vehicles that are coming out. Is there anything that you guys are excited about, particularly in the investment area?
So I personally am very excited about the intersection of blockchain together with IoT and hardware. I think that's a huge growth space also in the future. At the moment, it is an issue that both of these kind of capabilities are quite niche. So to find good teams that actually can do both is quite a challenge. But nevertheless, they are there, and that's quite cool. But I think in general, we will need to really see what regulatory uncertainty brings with it. I mean, there are some movements, at least in Europe, where we have now a draft paper called MiCA, so Markets in Crypto Assets, that is seeking to regulate stablecoins, and particularly the ones that have sort of substantial, let's say, developer community or community around them. I think it's an interesting movement. We'll see how much of the draft will really end up being law in the end. And I'm looking forward to seeing also what will happen in the US actually in terms of regulations. But because at the moment, at least what we hear over in Europe, it doesn't seem to be super crypto friendly at the moment.
Min, did you have anything you're kind of excited about in the investment space or the new vehicles? Or
yeah, we fundamentally identify as being talent investors, so we're a bit more agnostic about themes, because we just kind of want to back smart people in the things that interest them. And I think it's really interesting to sort of see with as companies mature and like people vest, like we're kind of like 3-4 years into some of the like more OG type of crypto companies. Coinbase, like, had a well-documented exodus of 60 people, very, very talented like developers. So I'm just very excited about what these people who are this new wave of founders who are technical but crypto native and have sort of matured their thinking, like working in like a growing startup over the last few years, and what they want to build next. We kind of divide our investment landscape into two very, very broad pillars, DeFi and Web3, and we continue to be excited by both. I think on the DeFi side, we are very excited about seeing more risk management technology, ultimately thinking about how we can, rather than create sort of traditional financial instruments on chain, how can we actually just reimagine, the same financial functions by using new primitives. It's the first time that, developers have read and write access to a lot of sort of, banking data, if you will, and they can create new primitives. So with this new sandbox, like, what can we create? Like on the Web3 front, data remains to be a huge issue for a lot of enterprises and startups. If you look at sort of like, the sort of cloud space, it's growing exponentially, held in a very oligopolistic structure. More and more data is coming online, and it kind of has to go through the entire sausage making machine. But in light of GDPR as well, it becomes very, very difficult to sort of collaborate. And I think this is where a lot of kind of data management protocols can come into play. We have a portfolio company called 3box that's launching Ceramic Network that will, work with a lot of projects and protocols to handle their data better. And we're also, I think, excited to see a lot of the middleware to make, all the querying layers and provide more analytics to the space more generally.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Both of you kind of touched a little bit on regulations, GDPR, and things that kind of, I guess, are potentially blockers for Web3 and opening up. Because essentially, Web3 is about opening up the web, partly. So, what do you see as, I guess, A, the potential hurdles as well as the things you've mentioned, and B, how we get over those, and what you see is, you talked about Europe. Are there areas that we can look at that we can kind of use to avoid regulations? What do you see about regulations, and what do you see about I guess how we work with them or step over them?
Yeah, I think, with regards to regulation, it's something that Consensus has been investing very heavily on since the beginning, and making sure that we have the right dialogue, and, we're doing our bit to provide as much, education to policymakers and sandboxes as possible, because it's emergent, it's technical, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. So I do think sometimes regulators get a little bit too much shade from people for maybe being, old school, not understanding it. Most people don't. So, I think it's our job to really actually be upfront and show that, this is like ultimately like we are creating long-term sustainable value, and we are also doing it in a way that, will protect customer interest, which is ultimately what a lot of regulators are primarily concerned about. From an investment perspective, and I was in fintech before this, and a lot of fintech actually blossomed because it flew under the radar for a long time. And especially in the UK, there was a very, very permissive landscape for fintech, where you had certain like caps, you had multiple sandboxes. A lot of the banks are very, very eager to like provide partnerships and integrations. I'm very keen to see that same model apply for crypto. So it's not so much about anyone avoiding regulation, but a lot of innovation is premised on regulatory arbitrage. So I think if a startup can actually be quite deft in avoiding still ensuring that they're compliant either by partnering with someone or utilizing someone else's license. I think there are very, very clever ways to structure this. And we also make sure that, we are backing founders who, if they do get tapped by the regulators, they are founders who are willing and open-minded to running regulated businesses, be it like 3 to 5 years down the line. But I do think personally, it's a red flag for someone to be like, spending a lot of capital and time and resources trying to get regulated now, because I think they'll see poor ROI on that investment.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think that's really key as well, what you mentioned before, Min, about our responsibility to educate the regulators, because, I personally, well, I'm from the UK, but I live in Australia, and I've had meetings with the Australian government about regulations about blockchain and crypto, and they, they seek to educate themselves because they know what they don't know, or hopefully most of them know what they don't know, and I think that's, I think that is really important for us to work really closely with regulatory bodies. Astrid, have you got anything to add on this?
Well, I can say that in Europe, at least, regulators are also very open in picking up the dialogue with projects, or also with sort of sub-regulatory bodies. They're actively surveying what kind of business models are out there and how they could apply the current regulatory framework to this, or how they need to adapt actually regulation so that it will allow for these companies to operate in a regulated and lawful kind of fashion. So you can definitely see that there is an interest rather to make it easier for companies utilizing blockchain technology or developing on it, rather than sort of stifling them too much. So there's definitely an open dialogue between projects and regulators there.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think we'll see more institutional players enter the space? Do you think we'll continue to see that? Because we've seen kind of a little bit of a rush of institutional money into digital assets. What's your opinion on that? And do you think we'll see more of it ongoing?
We'll definitely see more of it. So it's something that we can already actively observe over here. So you, at least also we're very frequently approached by larger funds in Europe to help them sort of understand blockchain technology and how they can actually assess these early stage technologies. They're definitely interested. In some cases, it's a little bit of an issue around regulatory, again, this regulatory uncertainty. Sometimes it's a misunderstanding of what these tokens are. And sometimes you can hear that institutional investors are sort of more comfortable with security tokens rather than utility tokens, which is quite a funny thing, given that actually people in crypto would say it's the other way around, that it's actually more straightforward to understand what utility tokens are, and sometimes security tokens bring their own kind of regulatory package with them, and they cannot be seen as a one-to-one of equity as such. But it's definitely, I mean, it's a space that is getting more and more professionalized. It's getting easier. There are also regulatory sandboxes for funds that want to have tokens and want to operate in a regulated kind of fashion. So it's definitely something that we'll see will happen more in the future.
Yeah, I mean, did you have an opinion on that or anything?
Yeah, I think it's something that's been consistently growing over the last year. Like, and when people reference institutional adoption, it could mean several things. We saw Paul Tudor Jones have a Bitcoin call earlier this year. Square put 50 million into Bitcoin a couple of weeks ago. PayPal just announced that they are allowing people to buy Bitcoin within the app. I think these are all positives. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're embracing blockchain technology in their enterprise stack, for example, which I've also seen from probably a lot of supply chain applications and use cases, and you're also seeing a lot most governments around the world, if not trialing, then at least looking into CBDCs as well. So I think, you know, with the sales cycles are longer, but ultimately, you know, it depends what, you know, what does it really mean to have like an institution sort of adopt? What does it bring to the space? You know, I think it's an interesting question. You know, Consensus had recently JP Morgan invested into Consensus, which we think is a huge validation and their acknowledgement of, you know, how important like it is to financial services. But you know, I think there's a lot we can do to actually make it easier for institutions to onboard. I mean, even like, for example, like there aren't many solutions that really fulfill institutional needs in a comprehensive way. You know, it's not about sort of private versus public blockchain, like that's already one hurdle, but a lot of, you know, a lot of times they can't even run their own node, and trying to get it through like the entire chain of command such that you find someone who's accountable for running that and operating that, the tax consequences and the custody, it's a lot. So I think until we actually have clarity of this, like, you know, it's not really clear to me what institutional adoption really looks like in a meaningful way. But I think we're starting to see, you know, definitely see signs of it emerging.
Yeah, I agree. So we're kind of coming towards the end. So I wanted to get to a couple of questions. So first one was a little bit on women in the space. So I just wanted to touch on that because I you know, tried to put this panel together, all female, and it's quite difficult because there aren't that many women in the space. And I just wanted to get your opinion on why you think that is and what we could do to kind of help kind of progress that. Astrid, if you wanted to start.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a problem that is also going around in the STEM area, such that we only see, you know, a visible portion of around, I think, 10 to 12% of females in the space as well. And I think it's a case of making them visible as well. I think they're definitely there. Sometimes it's also an issue around, we'll say, like working conditions. If you try to put together, you know, a family and your work life under the hood, it's not that straightforward often. I have a family, so I know it's not that easy sometimes, you know, to secure childcare and all that. So that's definitely a hurdle. I think you can already see that there are more and more female-led networks out there that are trying to help actually get other women into this space. And what I observe there is also sometimes that women, for some reason or another, are sometimes not loud enough. So they don't really speak up enough. They seem to be a little bit too shy in showing off, you know, what they can. And I think it's something that we see slowly changing. And certainly we're also trying at our fund to be more mindful about that and also onboard more female advisors and get also more women really onto our team, because I think they are a great source of talent. But it's just a case of helping it get more visible. And it's also, I think, quite good that these days, at least also, you know, at panels, that people try to really think about, you know, who could they also invite, who actually adds value and who is a woman. And sometimes people, it's quite interesting that sometimes it's really difficult for them to get it in their mind who could actually fit such a panel or who could actually be on there. But it's a very good exercise for anyone to actually go through it, and then you will suddenly come up with like, oh, there's actually a whole list of people that I could invite that would really suit that topic, that are really good and have actually something to say and something to add. But it's something that it's just a long process. It will not happen overnight, but it has already started, and it will get better, definitely.
Yeah. I think it's interesting what you said about not being loud enough. I think that's definitely something that I've suffered from myself. I used to put it down to my Britishness, but I think it is also partly because I'm a female. But yeah, I think getting loud and supporting each other and you know, this kind of part of why I wanted sort of put together an all-female panel, and I want to continue doing that when I'm participating in these events, because you know, I think we do have important voices. You know, we've had a great panel chat here today. Like, there's some great insights from both of you. So I think it's, you know, that's definitely something that we should all be playing a part in. And hopefully, I think, you know, with the generation that's being born now, they will be literally crypto natives. So, you know, hopefully those kids growing up as crypto natives will also be able to contribute to that, and we can kind of build towards that next generation. Min, did you have anything to add around that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely echo a lot of things that Astrid said. And, you know, there are elements like it's tough, like if you have a family, to like kind of be on Twitter and Telegram all day, and like, you know, I don't know, like understanding all these weird memes that people are posting. You know, I think in the recent weeks, like, you know, we actually wanted to, we're working on a blog post about this, because it feels as if the community has kind of like lost like its way a little bit. I think the reason why a lot of people feel that community like belonging is because it's inclusive. And a lot of like, you know, I think the recent dialogues has taken like quite an aggressive turn, you know, very much like the tribalism that Astrid like mentioned, that's quite mean and just really just not nice. And I think it's, you know, important that we remember why we're here and everyone's like working hard. I also think, you know, something that's like quite uncomfortable is that, for example, I've always worked in a male like dominated industry. So I show up to work not really thinking, oh, I'm like a woman investor. Like, I just think I'm an investor, right? But I also have to be very aware that some people might have come from like, you know, female dominated industry, and they're just like, whoa, like there's a lot of like, there's not many of me around here. And that's like, we've all been like the odd one out, and it's just very uncomfortable place to be. I also have seen some meanness amongst women, which I really wish wasn't the case, where you do see someone, well, I've been here for a few years and you're new to this space, so you don't really understand what's going on. Well, if that's the case, then let's teach them, right? Yeah. Let's actually lift each other up. And I think, you know, we're all stronger together. And, you know, I don't know, I would like to think it's not like, you know, natural to women, that women aren't like that. It's just sometimes survival of the fittest. So, you know, taking a step back and thinking about like, hey, like if I don't want to do that, I'm impatient about something, like actually like, no, I should try to meet as many women as possible for Zoom coffees, just to get to know each other. Even if it's just to socialize and chit chat. I mean, if like guys like, you know, all these like DeFi trader boys can like shit post, we can do the same. So
yeah, that's an excellent point. The DeFi trader boys is definitely a thing. Yeah, so I guess sort of coming towards wrapping up, I just wanted to ask one last question. Is like what you are most excited about in terms of the space and in terms of investment. Like what are you super excited about? Because I can think of a million things that I get excited about, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
Oh, definitely Polkadot. So we have seen this year that Polkadot launched, and it's looking very good to be on track. We'll soon see some parachains being latched onto that, and I'm really excited to see how that will actually work out. So that's really sort of my highlight at the moment, to really watch this ecosystem grow and how this will then interact also with other chains like Ethereum and Bitcoin and others. But I think that's definitely major excitement.
Min, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I continue to be just so impressed by like the unsung heroes of cryptography in our space. Like, it's really something that's quite niche, and it's a very, very long drag. And, you know, we're very proud to have backed a few incredible companies in this, like, you know, working hard on this, the field of zero knowledge. So, you know, Starkware, Asset Protocol, and Ligero, they're like, the possibilities are endless on the enterprise side, but you know, just what they've achieved to date already in terms of like, you know, just computation on like, you know, ZK rollups and like where they're going is, I think like even beyond crypto, like, you know, it's just a generalized technology that will touch so many different applications applications. I think it's also very, very important for something like privacy, which I think is becoming increasingly important and topical in our daily lives, and very keen for a lot of the cryptographic innovation that's being spurred on by in our space also start reaching a lot of sort of mainstream consumer facing applications.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the maturity of the space right now, and where we've gotten to, from the beginning of a lot of naysayers and saying that it wasn't anything, and I think we're really starting to kind of prove them wrong a little bit, and I think that's really, really exciting. I'm also really excited by the kind of intersection between things like art and crypto, with Nifties, and that's kind of really taking off now. I love that that whole kind of artist sort of like punk sort of space in crypto, and I think that's really exciting. Do either of you guys have any collectibles? Any Nifties? Have you invested in any yet?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's actually a movement here in Austria. I don't know, have you heard about it? It's a crypto stamp. So it's actually quite a fun thing. So I've got a few of those actually, but it's getting there,
Yeah. I think it's really neat. I mean, I've studied art history, but I think it's a really cool thing. Like the ownership of digital things. I think it's really cool. Min, do you have any investments in Nifties?
Yeah, we do. We have one that it's Horizon Games that they're launching a game called Skyweaver. It's now in public beta, but it'll be in it's just open in public very soon. And they have in-game NFTs related to that. We also have So Rare, which I think a lot of seems to be taking Europe by storm. It's creating collectibles of football players by partnering with clubs such as PSG, and it's actually a really, really fun digital fantasy game. And I think also what the Flow team have done with the NBA, I'm not even an NBA fan, but it's really cool opening up these packs and seeing collectibles, and they might be art, but they don't have to be static. They can be little videos, they can be audio. I think it's a very, very cool way to actually encapsulate digital art.
Yeah. I think that's kind of, I guess, like a neat, perspective across the whole of our lives, and kind of to your point, man, where we're going to see this enter our day-to-day lives in everything. So from work to play and kind of leisure, I think that's what's really interesting about what's happening now. We're seeing those applications really take hold. So yeah, I'm really excited, and you guys seem very excited too. But I'm really, really thankful for you for joining us for this panel. Let's get more all-female panels going in the future. Let's make sure that happens. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And any last thoughts from either of you?
Yeah, I think we've come a super long way in crypto this year, it seems, and in the last quarter. So very excited to see how it all plays out. But I think if anyone is watching and is curious, please do dive in. I think the best way to sort of immerse yourself is, reading is certainly a good way, but even just trying out MetaMask, Uniswap, even learning about the tribalism between Polkadot and Ethereum and the Bitcoin maxis. Maybe it could be a nice way to sort of and close off 2020 for everyone, because it's been a tough year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think beautiful words from Min, so nothing to add there. So thank you very much for having us. It's been a great panel, and also looking forward to seeing more of these all-female ad panels in the future, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zia. This was loads of fun.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Have a good day.